Korea, Sungeun, Hanguk University of Korean Studies, EU Center. She's going to present under the title of the paper, Reducing Early School Leaving in the EU, which is quite interesting, another social issue. Please let me give you Sungeun. Please go ahead.
Hello everyone. I'm from Graduate School of International Area Studies, Hanguk University of Foreign Studies, and this theme is about education. So just feel relaxed and enjoy my presentation. It's not enjoyable, but yeah, please. Okay. Let me start. By the globalization, the world became to share ideas and informations more quickly. And ideas and informations are based on knowledge, and this is becoming more important. So, therefore, as a form of transferring knowledge, the education and training became very important these days. Although the society is aiming to become knowledge-based, there are people with low education and who are mostly work as low-skilled workers earn less than others. And people with low educational level tend to have a more risk of social exclusion and poverty, and they are less competitive to find work in labor market. So the economic and financial crisis made it more clear, and the EU is focusing on this education problem, putting early school leavers as main concerns in Europe 2020 strategy. So in my presentation, I would like to discuss what is early school leaving and how the EU and its member states are on the action to solve the problems related to the early school leavers. So my presentation will be continued with these contents. First, we are going to see what is early school leaving by its definition and causes and consequences of it, and then next, I would like to see the efforts to reduce early school leaving in the EU by observing strategies of the European Union and related to this objective and policy frameworks. And I will end up with conclusion. So, what is early school leaving? The definition by United States is that early school leavers are those who do not graduate from high school. And in the OECD, they are 20 to 24 years old with education below upper secondary education. According to the Commission's staff working paper about early school leaving, in the European Union, the term early school leaving means the population aged 18 to 24 with only lower secondary education or less and no longer in education and training. In the European Union, so early school leaving rate is measured by the Eurostat labor force survey based on these two conditions. The highest level of education or training attained equals ISCED level 0, 1, 2, or 3C short, and respondents declared not having received any education or training in the 4 weeks preceding the survey. So as we can see here, the situation since 2000, the rate of early school leavers are decreasing. So considering the benchmark for the 2020 below the 10%, it is likely that they could reach the rate of 10%. But however, when we see it by the countries, it is quite different. So this is the Croatia, only 4.2%, and this is Spain, which has 24.9%, which is doubles the EU 28 countries average. So this difference comes from the diverse characteristics of the regions and nations, and the main factors for the early school leaving are different by the countries. Despite the differences of the causes and consequences, there are some common factors, as we can see. So I divided the causes as individual factor and socioeconomic factors. But you should remember that ESL problem does not result by only one causes. It is very complex and is is a mixture of various factors, so it should be remembered. And the early school living is highly individual's decision, so the individual factors are important to be mentioned here. So individual characteristics and physical and mental disabilities, or absent many days of absence, misbehaviors in school, pregnancy, and poor academic achievements can be a crucial factor for the early school living. And socioeconomic factors accelerate the decision to leave school early. So family background is very big factors for this problem. Family background includes the family instability, mostly caused by parents, divorced parents and one-parent family, or step parents, no parents. And migrant or minority background would cause to lose interest in the education. And unemployment of parents or education level of family members also have effect on the leaving school early. And this school factor means that the education system itself also causes the decision to leave school early. And the third one, communities and peer groups, it means that the family or neighbors around the student influences the student to decide to leave school early. So the biggest example in the Europe is Roma population, and they show high rate of dropout. And students of Roma minority group face discrimination at school. And more serious problem is they easily adapt to this situation, and sometimes they eliminate themselves from the school or the society. The big consequences of the consequence of the early school living is unemployment, and this is related to the survival of people's lives. So early school leavers have higher risk to be unemployed than those who have completed upper secondary education and higher qualification. This situation will be worsened according to the European Center for Development of Vocational Training's skill for training, and they have forecasted that there will be more needs for high qualification or medium qualification, but less for the low qualifications. And especially this youth unemployment is important, and the needs, the ages from 15 to 29 years old, young generations, not unemployed or nor in education or training system, they are the indicators for the youth unemployment. And early school leavers have a high risk of poverty and possibility of social exclusion. And this consequences goes far beyond the economic situation. They pay less tax and become more dependent on social support, and it could cause a fiscal difficulty of the state. And they have a tendency to participate less in democratic process such as elections or voting processes. So how European Union is dealing with this problem is I'm going to see. In year 2000, the Lisbon Council has agreed on the commitment to make the EU the most competitive and dynamic knowledge-based economy with the world capable of sustainable economy growth with more and better jobs and greater social cohesion. And based on this presidency conclusion, the Council of European Union in 2003 concluded on the ET 2010, and they made a benchmark for education and training sector. So here we can see that by 2010, an EU average rate of no more than 10% early school leavers should be achieved. So they mentioned about the early school leavers since the principle of the 2000. And then, blocking the good mood of the progress in the EU, around 2008, they faced the economic and financial crisis, as we all know. And EU started to suffer from the economic and financial crisis very deeply. The crisis has revealed the weakness of the EU economy, and it wiped out economic and social progress of the EU. Also, crisis revealed that people with low education level have to bear big impact of the crisis. So facing a severe financial crisis, European leaders decided to step up with common action, and this is called the Europe 2020 strategy. In Europe 2020 strategy, there's a 5 headline benchmarks, and the issue of the early school leavers has been set for as a main target, main benchmarks. And they have set seven flagship initiatives, and Youth on the Move, on Agenda for New Skills and Jobs, and European Platform Against Poverty are related to the education themes. So, with basis of the Europe 2020 strategy, and they decided to focus on the early school living, right? And then the European Commission have classified the member states' policy already is going on related to reduce early school living rate into 3 stages. The first one is the prevention. And this prevention policy aims to tackle the risk of ESL before the problem emerges. So early childhood education and care and structural strategies such as prolongation of compulsory education, desegregation policy, and positive discrimination measures are included in preventive policy. The next stage is intervention policy. Early intervention can be prevention, and it aims to avoid ESL by improving the quality of education and training, providing targeted support on students at risk. It focuses on identification, monitoring, and tracking activities. It can be divided into school-wide strategies, which is focused at the school dimension, and student-focused strategies, which is focused on the students at the risk of early schooling. So in third, the compensation policy, the last stage, the compensation policy is targeted those who already left the school or education and training. So second chance programs can be counted as compensation policy, and these policies are more directly linked to the labor market and other policies. Therefore, lifelong learning and vocational education programs can be important source of the policy. It could improve the skills to contribute and fulfill the labor market's needs. So this table I made shows some programs. It's not all, because I researched about a Spanish case, and it has more than 150 programs in just 1 year's period. So I only put them in some successful programs here. See it in the paper later, and I will come up with the conclusion. So, reducing early school living as one of the main objectives of the Europe 2020 means the member states started to consider the early school living problem as a serious socioeconomic challenges and way to overcome the current crisis. And the causes and considering it, when making the policy for the early school living, it should be considered the characteristics of region and nations each, even they have a common aspects. And then it is very important, I want to mention, the investment on the education has been decreasing, and this is very weird. Yeah, it should be clearly stressed that reducing expenditure on education is not a solution to overcome the crisis. It may be seen to have effect in short period to solve the problem of economic crisis, but it would bring much more cost to pay in the future. And less education means less competitiveness in this pro-knowledge-based society. A good education is one of the solutions for unemployment and exclusion. And it should be remembered that when making the policies for the education, that educational policies bring results in the long time. It's not a short-term policy. So they are not, and it brings the consequences. It does not bring the consequences right away. That once a policy is set for the Euro education sector, it needed to be continued, not interrupted by the political changes of the country. And very lastly, can I add something for my conclusion? And yeah, this is my opinion. I studied about early school living for 6 months, and I realized that this early school living concerns with every level of education.